This happened to a friend of mine, which we'll call him James for the sake of this story. James was about maybe in his early 20s, sometime around maybe 2010, and he told me about this story sometime in 2017. And he said this was his one story he would never forget. James, along with his girlfriend, decided to take a camping trip up to the mountains of Canada. There were some pretty good mountains in Canada, but you would have to look as hard as you can if you want to get them. Now, James and his girlfriend, which we'll call her by the name which she had given us, named Vanilla. Oh, I know Vanilla is a kind of a weird name for a girl, but her name was Vanessa, but she prefers to be called Vanilla, as Vanilla was her nickname. Now, Vanessa, along with James, decided to go camping together after their year of college. They were going to graduate college in a year, so they decided to do a camping trip once they got out of college for the summer. They decided to go up to the mountains of Canada, which was somewhere around north of Manitoba. When James went up there with his girlfriend, Vanessa, or Vanilla, they went up there, and they decided to spend at least a few days in the mountains. When they got up to Manitoba, they drove up there. They found a really good camping spot near the mountains. As soon as they found a nice good camping spot, they got to work on getting everything set up. Since James and Vanessa liked to do hunting and fishing, they caught what seemed to be a really big fish and turned it into a really great stew. Now, at night, however, James and Vanessa were asleep when all of a sudden James woke up to hear some man shouting. He was quite confused on who was shouting in the middle of the night, since Vanessa woke up and asked James if he heard it too, and she said that she woke up to hearing the sound of someone calling. It sounded like a man, so James stepped out with his gun and looked over to see if anyone was out there. But then, since there was nobody out there, the strange thing was that there was a shadow, what seemed to be a man, a few feet standing from the fireplace, or your camping spot. And this honestly made James feel really weirded out. He shined his flashlight to see a man carrying what seemed to be a knife. Now James and his girlfriend Vanessa freaked out and grabbed all their stuff, and they ended up abandoning their tent and jumped into the truck, where they drove off out of the mountains. They alerted the park rangers on their way out, and they went to the camp place to look, but they couldn't find the man. All they found was a knife, but they had no idea who that man was. I'm not sure, and neither is James and Vanessa know, if this man was ever caught or not, or the police have found him, but they had not seen him since that camping trip, and they're not going up to the mountains like that again. If they had not been woken up by the man yelling, then of course something would have happened that day, and James and Vanessa would never have been coming home. About a few years ago, probably around maybe 2016, I was about maybe 18 years old, and this happened in the month of August. I was in a day camp, or at least a little camp which goes for 2 weeks. 1 week is a day camp, while the second week from Wednesday to Friday is a camping trip. I was in the youth program at the time, so I was doing this camping trip with my friends. Of course, one night it was pretty nice as we didn't have much to do. We were sitting around the fireplace and we were eating marshmallows and even s'mores. However, my friend at the time, named Cameron, decided that we would go exploring at night while everyone else was still telling ghost stories and whatnot. We went down this one path that leads to another part of this camp, which of course we never went to in a very long time. So we went down there, and I told Cameron that this was probably a bad idea and that we should head back. Cameron decided that it was not that it was a good idea, but he wanted to check out something, as he saw something earlier the day when we arrived. We went down the path and through the forest until we came across a big opening. There was some teepee tents, and there was no lights or activity going on in them. So I'm assuming that this was also tents made by people, well, such as the youth and that. But we called out to see if anyone was there, but there was nobody in sight. Then we looked over to see that there were some clothes scattered around the ground. Some of them even were ripped. We were honestly confused as to what happened. We can even see bloodstains somewhere on the teepees, and we even found at least a few bodies of kids. They were probably teenagers, most likely from 14 to maybe 18. There was a few counselors there as well. We saw that there was claw marks on them and even some bite marks, and me and Cameron were confused on what the hell happened. We went back to telling one of the camp counselors about what we saw. They immediately called the cops, and the cops and even search and rescue helicopters and rescue dogs searched the area. The ambulance came to collect the bodies, and when they looked over everywhere in the campsite, they couldn't really tell who or what caused it, but most of the police officers are assuming that it might have been maybe some sort of animal. But what animal was it? We are still not sure to this day, and I still wonder what this animal could be. I thought it could have been maybe a bear or possibly a wolf, but still to this day, I'm still not sure as to what got these people to this day. But in another case, I really don't want to know. This happened to me at an OELC camp sometime in, I guess you could say, in 2016. And this obviously happened to be the most freakiest thing I've ever encountered, or ever has happened to me. Now, I was in a group with a bunch of other girls, as there were certain places that had campgrounds. Now, there were cabins that were located. One at the bottom of the hill was where all the girls' cabins were, and the one near the top of the hill is, or mountain, well, hill, is where all the guys' cabins were. Now, there were some nice camp counselors, and we were in groups of what seemed to be around 8 to 9 people. Now, I was actually one of the first groups in the cabin, and let's just say the camp counselor was really laid back and she was very nice. We'll call her Roxy for the sake of reasons. Roxy was a pretty good counselor who likes to sing and tell stories. She likes anything with Disney, and she and I hit it off pretty well, as I like a lot of Disney movies. One day we were camping by the fire one day with the rest of the group, and it was around sundown, and my friend, on the other hand, wasn't really feeling good, so she was going back to her cabin just to rest up. I was usually very fun of camping, and I was enjoying my camping trip. So as I was sitting down having a good time, I ended up deciding that I need to go find out where my friend, which we'll call her Sarah, was still taking a while. Sarah was one of the counselors, but of course, Roxy and I were confused as to why Sarah had been gone for a while. We thought that maybe Sarah could have got lost, so me and Roxanne went to go to the cabin to find her. But it turns out we couldn't find her, and we all saw was one of the what seemed to be the campers. One of them was lying down since she wasn't feeling too good. So we ended up going over to what seemed to be the bathrooms. But we couldn't find Sarah in there. We looked everywhere, but we still couldn't find our counselor. We headed back to our cabin, but we looked over to see that there was some figure standing near one of the cabin doors banging. Roxy and I were pretty shocked, and we walked over to see who it was, and we saw that it looked like a man. He looked scruffy looking, looked like maybe a guy in his 50s. He looked like a homeless person. Roxy and I ended up looking over to see that he had a knife at the back of him. He was probably hiding it when he was staring at the door. Probably didn't want anyone to see. He hadn't noticed us, so Roxy and I were going to run back. But as we were running back, the man turned around and noticed us running away. he started to chase us, but as soon as we got to what seemed to be the front hall, what seemed to be one of the camp counselors, and told them about the situation. The police were called, but they didn't find that man, as he must have got away. But we gave a very good description of what he looked like, and the police are still on the hunt for him. I'm still not sure if they ever found him, though, as he had never appeared on our campgrounds again. And this story still gives me chills every time I think about it.